Alright, the clicker here, going to do a reaction video. Haven't done one of these. Figured I'd give it a shot. Why not? So today I'm looking at Preach Gaming. Absolutely loved this channel for class guides way back when. He's also been very informative for quite some time. It was sad to see him kind of track off from WoW, but I'm glad he got to put some real time into some other MMOs. And this one's called Are MMOs Making You Toxic? So let's go ahead and get into this.
Nice glam, mate. Where did you get that from? The poor people shop. Don't invite me to your group. I want to join your group if anything. What's your score? What's your score? What is wrong with you? Have you seen your adventure?
The whole score thing back in Lynch King, I believe is when they started having some type of score. The gear scores. Yeah, I remember being the one people looking at going, "What's your gear score?" Not high enough, I can assure you. Not high enough.
Play? Do you think that's good, do you? You look like an Echo player. An Echo player. Do you want to look like a Roger Brown? Do you?
You absolutely suck, mate. You suck. Get out of my dungeon. And Guys, wait. Little Sprout's watching the cutscene. I remember my first time. Oh, we'll wait. It's fine. Hey! Oh, that adventure plate is amazing. No, it doesn't make you look poor at all. I tell you what, I wish I could make mine look like that. You know what? I just look around and I think...
Now, as someone that has not really played Final Fantasy, I'm going to assume this adventure play has to do with that. But cutscenes, our big issues ever was the cutscene would kick in, and normally the first time you ever dealt with it, you had to watch it. After that, you can escape through it, but that didn't always work. So that went from nice face to angry face real quick with those. Not at the player, of course, but at the game.
I think this is what happiness truly is. Alright, so the social contract is coming to WoW. This is not a WoW bash thing, because actually the social contract exists in many games already, but re-emphasizing this is something that is done for all the wrong reasons, is my take on this damn thing. What I've noticed, and you guys are well aware, is ever since we...
Was that just an entire list saying, hey, this is how you can play an MMO as a human being? I mean, if that's what it was, was what I lived in vanilla. A lot of people were big help back then, as I imagine most beginning MMO players are. So now this is becoming a social contract, as he has it. It's interesting to see how far we've come as a community, and maybe we're just a little bit off the route.
We stopped actively covering WoW coverage. I have been dipping my toe into as many MMOs as I can get my hands on, like in big ones. I'm not doing every single MMO that's ever been made. I'm not playing Hello Kitty Island Adventure or anything.
I like Hello Kitty Island Adventure a lot more than this stuff.
But we're looking at a lot of the big ones, Destiny 2, we've been playing some EVE Online, we've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy, etc., etc. And one thing has become very clear, and I've tried to make this point in a number of videos, is that it's gameplay design that encourages positive behavior, not a list of stuff that tells you can't be a racist, bigoted arsehole. That's kind of a given societally, at least for most people, and it's usually something that's done in a sort of ambiguous way. They're never very specific. It's like, if you are hate speech, whose definition of that is what, right? Who decides what isn't? Now, for most of us, it's very obvious. If you call someone an overtly racist name or some really homophobic or gendered term, then yeah, you're being a douchebag, and that's clearly obvious. But that line also gets pretty vague. Now, this is similar, and I know it's not on the same topic, to FF14's recent sort of discussion about add-ons. Is their purpose is very clear. Like, although it's written with some vagary, their intention is very clear. They don't want FF14 to turn into an add-on fiesta like World of Warcraft. They don't want that. So they're very clearly trying to say, look, if you're creating some sort of add-on or plugin that makes the game easier, in their opinion, or simplifies it, that's the kind of thing we don't want. But they paint it with a broad brush, which is like,
I've seen just a little bit on the add-on thing apparently Final Fantasy is having, and I actually kind of agree with them, because I remember playing in vanilla, going into TBC, and I don't think I really got into add-ons, like I want to say hardcore into add-ons, until Lynch King, and that's whenever it came into trying to raid. I was almost raiding daily in Lynch King, alts and whatnot, and add-ons were a lifesaver by all means. But I do think a lot of you're missing a lot in the actual game. A lot of the feel and a lot of the experience, which has been a word being thrown around a lot here of late.
We're just against all add-ons, right? It's that nature. We talked about that in the last video, is they paint it with that brush so that they can easily toe the line between what they want to get rid of and what they don't. They actually probably don't mind people doing X and Y, and they are just as most video games understand, there's going to be some drama and conflict that occurs in video games where you're playing with multiple people all the time from around the world who are brought up in different cultures and have different ways of thinking, and some people are just complete arseholes regardless. Like, that happens all the time as well. So what they don't want to say is, like, you can't say X, Y, and Z, and that has tried in the past. You might remember Twitch did something like this a while ago, where they came up with, like, literally a list of words that you weren't allowed to say. There was a big controversy is that you couldn't use the word blind. Where one of the most common things in all of video games is blind playthroughs. You put that in your title, and that tells everybody, because it's part of the nomenclature of the culture, is that this is somebody who's playing a game for the very first time. And now it has to be first playthrough and things like that, and people try and push it, along with a lot of other very derogatory terms. And when you try and do this very specific line, it makes it awkward, because one thing I know from people, not just gamers, is everyone's always trying to figure out the line. They're trying to figure out, where can I go? Where is it? Where can I push to? And when very strict lines are drawn, that's where it goes. So the TOS thing and the...
If you was ever wondering about people pushing lines, something I've learned, and I'm not somebody that likes pushing lines, is that the people with the most success are generally people that push the limits. They take it to the verge of too far. So I think that's why some people borderline break rules, is the risky people get the reward. Granted, the risky people also get the worst aspects as well. So you definitely really win or you really lose when you're that style of person.
And there was some outrage about this, but it seemed unnecessary to me. It's really Blizzard reiterating, is like, look, we're probably going to take a stronger stance on this, especially after the lawsuits that are going on and all the controversies. Like, we're going to be more actively taking part in this. Far too regularly, and this has happened recently with the influencer program, the experts,
And damn, I just want to throw out, Preach has lost some weight and has got a lot more hair. I do remember him doing a segment on that. Man, he's taking care of himself. He's doing a lot better than me.
The WoW Expert Council, the WoW Council thing, is, people releasing screenshots that have some racist terms in them, even though X and Y wasn't really involved, but it occurred in their environment, and Blizzard taking action and doing all this kind of stuff, and people going, well, that's not fair, this is all bullshit, and all this kind of stuff. And it's really a case that if Blizzard really wants to encourage a positive gaming behavior, there's a couple of approaches that are just considerably better that happen at the design phase of the game, and not really with social contracts, because I'm also seeing a lot of people arguing that, well, this will make things much better now. Now Blizzard has struck down and said, hey, we're not going to allow racism and stuff. It's like, duh. Duh. I mean, I've reported people for racism before, but ironically, there was a video I did during the Shadowlands Alpha where I did report somebody who was being a complete toolbox, and a lot of people in my comment section said I was being a snitch, a grass, a pussy, all those kind of things. I'm like, this could be a kid, right? This is going to be a kid who's having to listen to this shit. Like, that's not funny. That's not a joke. And you can call me an old man boom or whatever, but I look at it from that perspective. It's like, this could be one of my kids who's having to listen to this bellend talking all this shit and saying all this awful stuff, which he's not allowed to hear at home. And yeah, I don't think it's right. Whatever. I don't think it's right, and I'm not going to fucking stand for it. I don't care if you call me a pussy or whatever. And thankfully, Blizzard reached out to me afterwards and like, thanks for that. That was good. Make that example. And I was like, I wasn't trying to make an example. I would do that regardless if I was recording this or not. What I do want to talk about, though, is the ways that we can certainly create a better...
Definitely proud of him for that. You do see that a lot. I do have a extensive blocked or ignore list, just because that's just not the kind of person I want to surround myself with. Obviously, if you're playing in the Classic, that lowers the chances of you running with anybody, since that seems to be the only people that run a lot in Classic. Sorry, guys, but
environment, because ultimately there's a lot of people who consider WoW to be very toxic right now, which sucks because Dragonflight is hopefully going to be really good, and we don't want to leave that toxic atmosphere stewing, but it needs to change in different ways. FF14 is considered all sunshine and roses and happiness. Unquestionably, radically different social environment. Radically different. I'm not undermining how massively different the environment is. It is not perfect. There are certain social faux pas that exist in FF14 that people take extremely seriously. And a simple one would be if you have a new player in your dungeon and they're watching a cutscene for the first time, it is very, very respectful to let them watch it till the end. And if you what you can do is, if you've already seen that cutscene before, so you've played the story and you're replaying this dungeon for leveling purposes or whatever, is you can go and pull the boss straight away while the cutscene's playing. Some of these cutscenes are 2 or 3 minutes long.
Is this Final Fantasy? Because that looks really good. I love that art. I may have to really give that a try.
And that person is just not going to take part in the boss fight. The boss fights aren't difficult, so it can be 3-manned or whatever. And that person comes back after maybe watching a very important part of the story. People take the story very seriously in FF14, and the boss is nearly dead. Or it's like, I'm locked out of the room, or whatever it might be. And it's considered a really big social faux pas. Now, as well as not commending people at the ends of dungeons. And this is what leads me to the gameplay scenario. There are gameplay encouragements that work. Some games don't bother at all, which is another approach that people can take. So I would consider Destiny 2 to be more in line with that, which is that you can go into a strike or whatever outside of very, very organized raid content, and if there's people there, great. If there's not, there isn't. They're faceless, nameless for the most part. Very rarely you're going to bump into them again. It's essentially this mission can be soloed, and if other people are also doing it at the same time, then they're there too. And that's about it. Now that works, but it's kind of the hands-off approach and doesn't really foster a great community feel, which is where I think FF did get things right, and I hope WoW looks at it this way. I think the best example is honestly Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus is a very, very hard experience for the average player to get a positive experience with. Years ago, I would have said something similar to what you'd read on many forums when people struggle with Mythic Plus, is make your own group. And the more I think about it now I'm detached from that world and looking back on it, it's like, wow, that's actually really shitty advice. That's like terrible advice. Yeah, you can get a group together. But the problem is, you're putting your key up on the chopping block. And this is what then fosters the negative environment of individually scrutinizing every single player that you're going to be dealing with. It encourages that play. And then Blizzard doubles down on it, because now we have the rated.io score in-game as well. And the reason it does that is you're putting your key up for chopping. And if this key fails, it's your key that suffers. And your loot that suffers. And all these kind of things. So, of course, you're being encouraged to really heavily scrutinize and take the best of the best of the best possible, as best as you can tell. Which then heavily...
As a very casual MMO player nowadays, especially casual Warcraft, I've always seen the Mythic Pluses, especially after you passed, like +5 for someone like me that just, I don't try to be the number one. I just try to do the best I can. I'm trying to have fun. I'm not on Warcraft or any MMO trying to run a business, but I'm also not trying to be number one. And I always seen the Mythic scene as the more competitive, the real challenge for people that needed a challenge. And so I actually understand when somebody looks at you and says, hey, well, your gear don't look good enough for this, or whatnot, especially somebody that don't run with you, because I've seen people in crap gear do amazing. So I'm not saying gear score is the answer for anything. I'm just saying I do understand, especially when you're trying to be competitive like that.
It undermines all the other players who just want to get their dungeon done and are probably really average to good players, if not amazing players. There's always some bad ones in there, but they're heavily pushed out of the scene because of the environment around how the game works. It's designed to not reward failure too well. It used to do that. He used to do that in several ways. I remember even back in vanilla, when average BG started rewarding high warlord gear, although enough points to buy them, and people were really upset. Now, that was part of an exclusivity situation, but you can now see, if you think about it, is Mythic Plus, if it goes wrong, it's not going to increase your score. Let's say you're farming score. It doesn't increase your score anymore. It's all going wrong. People are leaving. And we've all seen those threads, if you've paid any attention, of people basically calling for the abject murder, hanging, and disembowelment of anybody who leaves a Mythic Plus dungeon and leaves your key high and dry. And that's because it's a very negative effect of putting yourself out there and trying to get in a group. Much safer to just keep rolling and rolling for hours and hours until somebody else lets you in, and you get a lesser negative impact. But if the group falls apart, you still get a very negative impact. It's a gameplay situation that's creating this environment, which leads to gear score, which leads to having rated.io score and all those things, because the gameplay intuitively gives that. Vice versa, on the other side, like some of the things we've talked about before, is their endgame zone Bosia, which fully encourages audience participation and cheering on people to do well. You get rewarded for that, for taking part in that situation. In dungeons, if you have a new player, like I talked about before, they will reward you with more stuff. A big message appears as soon as you enter that dungeon saying, hey, there's a guy here who hasn't done this dungeon before. We're going to give you more rewards. Be respectful of their time. And let them watch the cutscenes. This is the kind of thing that's beneficial. You get the commendation system at the end, which...
I do like that idea. But Blizzard could also implement, if you don't down like the first boss, that you just get your key back. Because normally if one of those groups is going to fall apart, it's probably going to be before the first boss.
Which is polite, and most people do this, is give a commendation at the end. Who did well there? That then encourages them to build up their personal commendations so maybe they can help others. It encourages people to be helpful. When people are stuck, people are clearly not understanding what's happening in the dungeon, they're failing things, it helps you to go, hey man, this mechanic that you failed on, like, say you got Doom. So what you need to do is you need to run on the glowing platform, and that'll get rid of the Doom debuff so you won't die. It's like, oh, okay. And then that person might commend them for that. Now, obviously, there's the mentor situation in FF14, because not every solution is perfect where people are being overly helpful. That's a problem as well, but I think I would rather have people be overly helpful than actively hating against each other and creating environments that lead to conflict. And I think that's what it ultimately boils down to, is if they really want to solve the toxicity stuff over in WoW, which is prevalent, there's no getting away from it. I don't run into it a lot. I don't think it's as widespread as people feel it is. Of the years that I did the TDP, where we were running Mythic Plus day in, day out, very, very rarely did I have a negative experience.
There is a lot of toxicity, but you can almost log in and you can see the people. You know, after a week, you can pretty much see, you know, half of the toxic community every day, so you know who to avoid. And like I said, the people that generally run into, especially talking like down in chat, turns into a lot of toxic people. But you gotta remember that's actually a very, very small percentage of the actual population. There's tons of people that are great to run with, that have great just mentalities and personalities. So
Wait, why? It's on the other side of the room, bro. Why? What are you achieving? Ah! God! Emma, play this. That's fucking killing me.
What am I pressing?
It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter.
But I can't play properly without a damage meter.
But at the same time, 99% of my dungeons were successful and everything was fine, because I know I'm carrying my weight for the most part, and usually other people are as well. So it generally worked out pretty well. But there are obviously groups out there with a lot of average to lower average players joining groups that are struggling, and then they're being excluded from further content. And there's really no incentive, like I just talked about, to try and encourage them in some way to get better or to learn and get better without being an offensive intruder into your personal space of going through the talent list like, this is shit, this is shit, this is dog shit, you know, this is bad, what you're doing is bad, your rotation is terrible, just read a guide, lol. All this kind of stuff. The gameplay of the systems in the game don't encourage that positive gameplay. And that's what I would really like to see. If Blizzard is taking a proper stand against the toxicity in the game.
But you just mentioned talents and whatnot. I think this really triggers down to playing the meta. And that has got to be my number one most hated thing about anything in Classic, has been the meta. That is what absolutely has killed my experience more than any of the toxic players I've had to deal with.
Game, and I'm fully encouraging them doing that. What I would really like to see is be respectful of people's time. The biggest one. It's one of the biggest reasons that I don't miss WoW right now, and I'm hoping changes in Dragonflight. Talks about this a lot on Allcraft with Asmon and Rich, is I want to be respectful of my time. If I think about the amount of times that I've run Mythic Plus, and I will use that as the prime example rather than raiding here, looking for an item, and you're doing 30, 40 runs, and I know when I was talking to OK Mage at the recent Race to World First, it's like she ran the same dungeon 200 times over the course of a season and still didn't get the item she wanted. Like, utterly ridiculous. Having to do 10 vaults to end up with a pittance of currency at the end because none of the items it gave you. It's like, be respectful of players' time, because it creates, if you don't, it naturally creates frustration. It naturally creates frustration. I've wasted all my time. I did 9 hours of dungeons and raids and Mythic Plus or whatever it might be in PvP, and I got nothing for it. I got absolutely nothing for it. It's just not respectful of my time, and there's games out there like PoE's just the season's new season just launched. It's like 400 hours of gameplay for free. It is. Like, I know people go, oh, but you might buy stash tabs and things. It's like, yeah, but you really...
I get the being respectful for time, but we are talking about an MMO and having to gear up for raiding and, hiring content. And, one of the big complaints, and I'm pretty sure I've seen big name YouTubers complain about gear just being given to you. And I think when it comes to the Race the World First people, that's just, they need to suffer just like the rest of us that, we're looking for gear too. Just because their luck is just as shitty as ours, RNG, I think that's just part of the game. So I disagree on the aspect of, I don't see that as a respecting people's time. When it comes to respecting my time, I want to enjoy the dungeon. I can just be upset that the boss didn't drop what I needed, but I am a person that I can run a dungeon over and over and over and over. And I can be tired of the dungeon, but if I know somebody that needs it for something I needed and I continue running it, it's not going to break my heart.
Really don't need to. I played for 150 hours without ever doing so. And the only reason I did is because people were like, you really should. But I was fine. Like, I could continue to play that game for free all the time. And it's those choices are out there. I really hope they do something about the toxicity over there, because right now that's the impression a lot of people have, like League of Legends had and still carries, is that game is really toxic. And it's not just the solution to just outright ban people, it's to foster a gameplay environment that doesn't encourage it. So I'd love to see your thoughts on this, guys. I really would, because honestly, reading through it, it's like, this is good, but it's not going to change the fact that your environment fosters negativity.
All right, so, man, the idea of are MMOs making you toxic? I know that whenever I was being very competitive, especially like in Lynch King and Draenor, I won't say I was toxic, because I always gave anyone a chance. I could look at the gear and be like, ooh, this might be a rough start to this run, especially in raids, taking more than 10 people. At some point, you may have to ask somebody, say, hey, look, I said, I might have to ask you to step out, but through this week, we can help get you some more gear. Next week when we come back to this raid, we can make it a little farther. You can make it a little farther to increase your chances at gear and having those opportunities, because there are some times where you got to look and go, okay, our DPS just ain't getting it, or our tank's just taking too big of hits, and I've been that tank taking too big of hits. Healing's just not up to par. You can look and go, okay, we're definitely lacking here. We've changed how we're fighting this in an attempt to negate where we know our weak point is. It's just not working. Sometimes you do got to step back, ask someone to step out, or you got to just work on gear for the next week and try for the prior week going in. So I think it's a very good video by Preach. I expect nothing less out of the man. He does great work, and hopefully we'll see more out of him. And what's your thoughts on your current MMO toxicity? Is your community absolute shit, or do you agree with me and that what you're seeing is only a small portion? So I try not to judge the entire community on it. So hopefully you don't either. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Alright, so that's the end of this video. You guys take it easy.